In 1857, the new Louvre had been publicly inaugurated. The interior, however, was undecorated, and, under the Empire, the purpose of various areas of the Museum Palace was different from what had been planned under the Second Republic. For instance, the room behind the Pavillon Denon, in which the inauguration had taken place, was originally intended to be a gallery for paintings, with sculptures in the room below. It was now destined to be the Salles des Etats, the hall in which the Senate and the constituent body would meet jointly in the presence of the Emperor to open the parliamentary year. Below it would be the Salle du Manège, where the exercise of horses took place, and education in equestrianism, especially for the heir to the throne, the Prince Imperial. Stables would be below that. The vestibule Denon was the main entrance to the museum and to the Salle des Etats. Behind the niche, with its semicircular bench, was the Salle du Manège. The niche has now been removed. Where the niche was is now a doorway into the Manège. Charles-Louis Muller began work in 1858 on painting the Salle des Etats. Imperial France protecting the arts, industry and religion would decorate the ceiling. This painting did not survive the fall of the Empire, but some preliminary sketches are in the Louvre collections. The main use of the Salle des Etats was, of course, for the annual opening of legislative sessions of the parliamentary bodies. On these occasions the throne and canopy and symbols of imperial power were placed on their raised platform beneath the lofty, life-size trompe-l'œil painting of a statue of an imperial horseman set against an architectural fantasy. These paintings, representing the triumph of Charlemagne and the triumph of Napoleon I, was situated at each end of the hall, above a door flanked by caryatids carved by Pierre-Jules Cavelier. The room was also used for banquets and other imperial celebrations and ceremonies. After the fall of Napoleon III and the beginning of the Third Republic, the imperial trappings were no longer appropriate, and the political purpose of the hall no longer existed. It therefore became the largest room in the museum, and Edmond Guillaume was the architect of its conversion. To make room for pictures to be hung, the windows were blocked up and the balconies removed. The painted ceiling was replaced by a glass one. Ornamentation was still lavish, but with artistic rather than imperial iconography. French artists, for instance, were represented in medallions set around the entablature, and in 1886 the room housed French paintings. The Salles des Etats was the venue in 1930 for a retrospective exhibition of the paintings of Delacroix. After being closed once more during the Second World War, the Salles des Etats reopened in 1950, bare and rectangular. The glass roof had been replaced by a larger oblong, and the only decoration was a form of Greek key pattern around the top of the walls. The room was now devoted to Venetian painting, dominated at one end by Veronese's Marriage in Cana. This had been one of the paintings looted by Napoleon's armies and not returned to its previous place in San Giorgio Maggiore in Venice, on the pretext that it was too fragile to be moved. It had not been too fragile to be evacuated to Brittany during the Franco-Prussian War, nor to have been rolled up and hidden in various places in the provinces during World War II. In 1960, the Mona Lisa was placed in this room, in the centre of a side wall, displayed on a panel which separated it from other paintings. It became the main attraction in the room. Another massive rethinking of the Salles des Etats, sponsored by Nippon Television and costing 4.8 million euros, was completed in 2005. The Peruvian architect Lorenzo Piqueras removed all decoration and provided new walls, new ceiling lighting and air conditioning. The Mona Lisa at one end and at the other the marriage feast at Cana were hung on freestanding walls, and all was designed to allow free circulation of the huge crowds which now visit Leonardo's portrait. In a further transformation, in 2019, the Mona Lisa acquired a new glass case. Among other improvements, most noticeable is the changed colour of the walls. Deep midnight blue replaces ochre. The large oval painting on the left of this last photograph has an interesting history. It is Paolo Veronese's Jupiter hurling thunderbolts at the vices. It was painted from 1554 to 56 for the ceiling of the council chamber of the Council of Ten in the Doge's Palace, Venice. It has been replaced there by a copy. In 1797 it passed into the possession of the French invaders. At the end of the First Empire it was cut into 3 pieces to fit the ceiling of Louis XIV's bedchamber at Versailles. Then, in 1859, it was restored and installed on the ceiling of the Salon Carré in the Louvre. Now it hangs among the Venetian paintings on a wall of the Salles des Etats. One door accessed the Salles des Etats from its vestibule, which was directly above the vestibule Denon. It is the highest room in the Louvre, now known as the Salle Denon. Its decoration, completed in 1866, was, like that of the Salle des Etats, by Charles-Louis Muller. The tall square room has rectangular windows overlooking the Cour Napoleon, 3 on the north side, and next to them one each on the eastern and western sides, forming a bay. Although the central window on the north side is rectangular from the inside, it is taller and arched from the outside. On the eastern and western walls, 2 doors matching the windows lead to the Salle d'Arrue and the Salle Molien, and on the south side 1 door leads to the Salle des Etats. Paintings are hung above the windows and doors, and between some doors. They include Roger rescuing Angelica by Ingres, The Young Martyr, and the Death of Queen Elizabeth I, both by Paul de la Roche. Raphael at the Vatican by Horace Vernet. Andromache and Pyrrhus by Pierre Narcisse Guérin. Above the level of the paintings, on all 4 sides of the room, is a cornice supporting a narrow balcony. Above this, 3 round-topped windows on each side of the room extend into the dome. Between the windows are trompe-l'œil paintings of niches containing statues of allegorical female figures. Above the windows on each side is a painted lunette symbolizing monarchy's influence over the arts. The monarchs chosen, shown with works for whose creation they were responsible, are St. Louis with the Sainte Chapelle, François I with the Château de Chambord, Louis XIV with the Invalides, and Napoleon I with the Arc de Triomphe du Carrousel. From the corners of the room above the balcony rise busts of French artists, the sculptor Jean Goujon, the architect Philibert Delorme, the painter Nicolas Poussin, and a member of the Audran family, perhaps Gérard Audran, the 17th century engraver. Laurel branches rise from behind the busts to support shields bearing the initials of St. Louis, François I, Louis XIV, and Napoleon I. Above these, gilded eagles spread their wings. These eagles carry the central design, which again represents monarchy encouraging the arts. An oval plaque held aloft by cherubs bears the bust of Napoleon III, wearing a laurel wreath as on his coinage. Below the bust, a seated female figure is painting, surrounded by symbols of art such as books and a lyre. Her cloak is lined with ermine, so she perhaps represents France. The Salle Denon has become part of the museum, sometimes housing a shop. In May 2022, the studio Malka was selected to create 15 modular pavilions, arch-shaped, to provide areas of calm in the busy museum. Some of them have been pictured in the Salle Denon. The emperor liked to be portrayed and seen by the public on horseback, driving, or being driven. It is not surprising that he devoted so much space in his new Louvre to horses. The Manège, or riding school, situated under the Salle des Etats, was not, as might be expected, an open space, but a room divided into 3 aisles by 2 rows of 6 columns. These stone columns support vaults of stone and brick. The capitals of the columns are carved with 12 different designs featuring birds and animals connected with riding and hunting by 4 different sculptors: Pierre-Paul Rouillard, Emmanuel Frémier, Germain Demey, and Henri-Alfred Jacquemart. On each capital, the head of the main beast, wolf, bear, fox, heron, eagle, owl, etc., appears at each of the 4 corners, surrounded by whatever other beasts or accoutrements are suitable. The bases of the walls and columns were surrounded by oak panelling to prevent the horses injuring themselves on the stonework. At the southern end of the Manège was a gallery for spectators. This is now in the Musée de la Voiture, in the Château de Compiègne. Horses entered and left the Manège on the western side by a double door which was surmounted by a plaque commemorating the completion of the building. Above the doors on the outside is a tympanum decorated with a sculpture of horses by Pierre-Louis Rouillard. The doorway leads to a courtyard then called the Cour Colincourt, named after the first equerry of Napoleon I. It is now called the Cour Lefuel, after the architect. This courtyard, at a lower level than the Manège, is reached by a double staircase of low steps. The horseshoe shape is inspired by the similar 17th century staircase at Fontainebleau, where Lefuel had worked. The staircase, suitable for what would now be photo opportunities, appears in a print in l'Illustration of the 22nd of June 1867, showing the visit of the King of Prussia. Between the stairs was a water trough and fountain. The lower ends of the balustrades carry bronze statues of animals, again by Pierre-Louis Rouillard. Across the trough between the ramps, a wolf with a puppy, and a bitch defending the rest of her puppies, snarl at each other, spouting water into the trough. At the outer ends of the balustrades are a dog fighting a boar and a dog fighting a wolf. In the middle of the wall opposite the ramped stairs is a porch supporting a balcony. This was the entrance of the two-floor apartment of Napoleon III's first equerry, General Fleury, in the Moliens wing. There were stables on the ground floor of the Moliens wing, under the first equerry's apartment. They extended over the ground floor of all the buildings at right angles to the Grande Galerie, that is running north to south, and at basement level from the Pavillon Moliens eastward to the Pavillon Daru, on the same level as the Lefuel and Visconti courtyards. Horses for riding required stabling and loose boxes for 40, housing for 4 carriages, tack rooms, heated wash stalls, storage for blankets, a waiting room for grooms, a manure pit, a water supply. Carriage horses required similar facilities, but for 100 horses and 30 carriages. Under the Moliens wing was stabling for 14 horses used by aides-de-camp, and also 14 loose boxes for the horses the Emperor himself rode. Under the Moliens gallery was stabling for 40 horses for 4-horse carriages, all of them bay or brown, with black pasterns, manes and tails. Under the Daru gallery, partitions formed 4 separate stables. The first could hold 24 town horses, the second 8 small horses belonging to the Emperor, the third 8 small horses belonging to the Empress, and the fourth housed the Prince Imperial's Shetland ponies. The long corridor underneath the arcades was for storage. The ill-lit space separating the 2 main stables, under the Denon vestibule, held heaters for the Salles des Etats and the new galleries for paintings. 3 concierges were lodged on the ground floor of the Grande Galerie, and for each of the 3 gateways which replaced the single one in the 1860s, there was a gatehouse, a warming room, a room for grooms, forges, and a farriery. In addition, there were a cleaning room, a room for coach harnesses, and various tack rooms. About 300 men employed in the stables, grooms, postilions, couriers, coachmen, ostlers, etc., were provided with lodgings. After the fall of the Empire, some of the imperial horses were auctioned off. The sale took place in the Cour Colincourt, later Cour Lefuel, on the 2nd of September 1871. Glass roofs with a clock and lighting had been installed in the courtyard by this time. In 1881, Léon Gambetta created for his friend Antonin Proust, no relation to the novelist, the post of Minister of the Arts, not just the fine arts, but also industrial art and decorative art. His ministry was to be situated in the Louvre, for which purpose coach houses had to be vacated. The Empress in exile was required to take possession of carriages and harnesses which belonged to her. 2 auctions were held to dispose of other carriages, but Gambetta's government lasted only 66 days, and the new Ministry of the Arts was abolished and never revived. The stables are now part of the museum. The riding school became part of the museum in 1879. From 1898 to 1927 it housed a collection of casts. In 1928 it became the reception area and main entrance of the museum, and retained that role until the creation of the glass pyramid in 1984. In 2004, the riding school reopened after a renovation which included constructing 2 new staircases to the level below. The room now displayed 76 objects from collections originally amassed in the 17th and 18th centuries. Those chosen were antique sculptures which had been mended or reconstructed at a time when such reconstructions were popular, but which could not now be displayed together with entirely original antiquities. They are arranged in groups of the same provenance. There are sculptures collected by French royal families, and others acquired later, such as the Borghese collection bought by Napoleon I. From the Borghese collection came the Woman at Prayer between 2 Ionic columns. Another sculpture of coloured marble from this collection had been put together to represent Seneca dying, but is also called the Old Fisherman. Those parts of the Albani collection retained in the Louvre by Louis XVIII are also represented. Here is the Albani Horus, which is made up of Egyptian alabaster legs from a statue of Ramses II, dating from about 1250 BC, completed and restored as Antinous with 18th century Italian alabaster. Thetis and Alexander the Great from the Albani collection also feature here. The satyrs which supported the fountain basin in the gardens of the Villa Albani stand here in the same formation. Since the dispersal of the horses and carriages, the Cour Lefuel has mostly been unused, inaccessible to the public, and shabby. It became the Café Denon in 1998. It was next, for a long time, encumbered by scaffolding and by the prefabricated sheds housing the team working on the launch of the new branch of the Louvre Museum in Lens. That museum opened in 2012. In 2015, the Cour Lefuel was described as deserted. In autumn 2018, it was the turn of the Cour Lefuel to to be the Louvre courtyard transformed by Nicolas Ghesquière, artistic director of the Maison Louis Vuitton, for his fashion show. The courtyard received a temporary roof. It remains the only Louvre courtyard not permanently roofed. The 19th century staircase contrasted with the space-age decor of the auditorium and the catwalk, described as a platform like something out of Star Wars. The courtyard was then closed for renovation in 2019. It is now repaired, clean and elegant, but still roofless and unused. In the 20th